So we are at the hour here at Quilt and Learn. This is our second live event of the day. One more to come later on, but very much looking forward to hearing from these four amazing artists we have with us today. We're going to jump straight into it, but the chat is working. So feel free to say hello, say where you are in there. And do submit any questions that you want each person to answer, and we will take them as we go along. So we are going to just start sharing here, and we are going to start with an amazing artist who I am lucky enough to know personally from my local quilt girls, Lorraine. We're going to start with you. So
Thank
please
you.
take it away.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be part of Quilt and Learn for a second year. Many people know me best by my Instagram and online name is Quilting in the Fog. And so today I'm going to take you through the three groupings of quilts that I make that I call Polychrome, Reimagined, and Commentary. Next slide. Next. Okay. Quickly, my background, this is me in a nutshell. I grew up in Texas. My mother made all of our clothing and she taught me how to sew. I went to University of Texas and was in the Longhorn Band, but I got a business degree. I never took an art class. Really, my whole life, I thought of myself as a musician artist. Following college, shortly thereafter, I went to the Peace Corps in Kenya, where I worked with women's income generation projects and actually worked with a tie-dye and textile fabric group. And I moved to San Francisco shortly thereafter, where I've been almost 40 years, met my husband and my two lovely kids that have grown up here in San Francisco. Okay. My quilting journey really started with making quilts for my family and from my family's clothing. But I was going through my stuff and realized this was the first quilt I made. It was when my kids moved into big kid beds and I made each a quilt. And I had a pattern from Sunset Magazine that had kind of a scrappy looking log cabin. And I didn't have any scraps because I didn't quilt or sew. So I went out and bought about a yard of every strip color that you see here, not having any sense of context. So I'm still using up that fabric 20 something years later. Next slide. In the subsequent years, I really did a lot of making, again, clothing from my kids, my family's clothing and t-shirt quilts and experimenting with doing things. Next slide. So fast forward probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I got a lot more serious about it. I'll tell you a little bit more about that story, but these are really the three groupings. I'll go through each of my groupings of quilts to show you what they are. We'll go into polychrome first. So polychrome are the grouping of quilts I call their intense color, lots of contrast. It's usually improvisation. I largely do improvisational work. Next slide. People often ask me, what color theory do you use? And, and my color theory is yes. And I like all the colors, the more the better, lots of contrast, the crazier the better. I know some people look at this and it's just way too much, but I realize it's truly what excites me is seeing a lot of color and variety in pieces. Okay, next one. Here are some examples of the kinds of things that I do. The one on the left is fireworks. That's part of the class I'm teaching, string theory 3 ways. Go ahead. Just more examples of actually the string theory class on the right. And I also do a lot of curves. A fun thing I like to do is take quilt blocks and mount them on canvas. Great gifts and good things to sell. Go ahead. This is another one that is, again, it was leftover scraps from another quilt that I'd made for someone and experimented with it. Actually, I'd started by wanting to make a quilt that didn't have any square edges. And so I made this bubbly looking thing and quilted it and completely ruined it. I just did a terrible job. So I tossed it aside. And then during the pandemic, I pulled it out. I picked out all the quilting, added edges to make it square so I could mount it on a long arm. And it's kind of just a lesson for me that, try again. Even if at first you don't succeed, pick it out and try again. Go ahead. Next slide. I really like, also in my color theory is just taking a color and experimenting with it, making a whole quilt out of, pull out all the greens that I have and test a technique. So these are all color theory or color explorations and technique explorations. They're all about 36 inches and they're fun to make and fun to look at. Next slide. I also really like twists on tradition. I really appreciate and love traditional quilt blocks, and also like pushing them and making them improvisationally. But here's two examples of things that I made early on to, learning how to use traditional quilt blocks. Next slide. This is my most recent twist on tradition. I'd wanted to make a cathedral windows for a long time. Actually, someone at our guild did a little workshop, and you often see this block as white and very pristine. And I had a lot of these African fabrics left over from my time in Kenya. So this is only about 24 by 24 inches. And I really enjoyed making this and then, testing out. I'd never made prairie points. So just sort of another example of taking something that's traditional and making it look different than what you might expect. Next slide. The quilt behind me is another example of that. This is actually a quilt called a biscotti quilt. A gentleman named Brandon Wolf. I took a workshop from him, but what it is you take make a very, very large log cabin, chop it up into squares and rearrange it. And it just makes such an amazing look. So this was actually in an exhibit called Twist on Tradition that was a new category at the International Quilt Festival. Improv mosaic is something that I started doing and I teach it, and I'll tell you a little bit about the story for that on the next slide. In 2020, I'd lost my 60-hour-a-week director of development job and was feeling very sad. I was turning 60 that year. Of course, it was COVID. But the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, the DeYoung, had an open call for art for artists in the Bay Area. And so I really didn't know what I was submitting. I think I thought it was going to be an online exhibit, but I submitted this quilt. And out of 12,000 artist entries in the Bay Area, they picked about 750. And one of them was my quilt. And it was absolutely the best thing that happened in 2020. From this, they gave each artist their own website and contact information and pricing. And so somebody purchased this quilt. And with that money, I bought a very old long arm and really started getting very serious about quilting and also teaching. So next page. Why it's called 1, 2, 3 is because whatever size the smallest block is, and in this case, it's about 2 inches, the medium side is 2 times that, or 4 inches, and the largest is 3 times that, which in this case would be 6 inches. And so I've taken this and I've done it as small as 1 inch for the smallest block and as large as 15 inches for the biggest block. But go the next slide, please. It's a really fun way to play around with your scraps. In my class for this, I do teach how to do a chain piecing method of making log cabin blocks that you can make like 30 at a time, and which is a great basis for the rest of the quilt. So this is something I teach a lot. I love making them, and I've been doing a lot of varieties on this technique and this layout. Next slide. I also love scraps. There's nothing too small to toss. I'm kind of famous for having, a crazy amount of scraps. This was actually one of my first scrap quilts I ever made. Next slide. Oh, this is my helper. So I take my bins of scraps, I dump them out on the floor, and then my dog likes to play in them. You can move on to the next slide. This is another example of a scrap quilt. This is one of the techniques that's in my string theory 3 ways class that's part of Quilt and Learn. And I took the strips of scraps that I had that all had prints and, started making this rainbow quilt. And I'm always thinking I'm going to use them up, right? And that never happens. I still have lots of print strips. Um, this was another one of my early, crumbs scraps quilts where I made a quilt out of a couple of quilts out of these different colors, and I just saw in the basket these pieces, and they just looked great together. So it's just a fun puzzle, mindless, just pick up a piece. What's something that's different in color, but maybe will fit in size, and just start sewing them together. And so it's one of my favorite things that I do. I'm actually teaching a class at City College of San Francisco Extension on this for a day-long class, and I'm going to start teaching it Zoom and elsewhere if people want it. Just another example of an early scrap. Again, look at these. I often just take things that you wouldn't necessarily think would go together, but you look at it in a pile because it was in your scraps bin, and just start assembling them. So this is another example. The quilt on the top right is a very large king size bed quilt, and the trimmings from that were about an inch or about an inch or half an inch long. So I had all these beautiful little stripes, strips that I didn't want to toss out. So I started, using black to insert them into crazy shapes. And it ended up, sometimes the experiments that you start with end up being some of your favorite things that you've made. This is one of them. And I started piecing it together. It's a smallish quilt, but once I made it, I thought it looked a lot like the space shuttle, or the photographs from space. So I added a galaxy. Okay, next slide. Another thing I do is I'll take all my scraps of one color, put them to, sew them together and make yardage, and then you can cut them up and use them in patterns to give it a little, kind of a contemporary or maybe less traditional look. These are 2 examples. All right. So my last category is, actually it's not my second category is reimagined, and it's repurposed clothing, mostly using shirting and denim, but really anything will do. So next slide is the first one of these that I did, and it's shirts. It's about, my husband was cleaning out his closet and had realized he had about 20 shirts that didn't fit him anymore, or that were too old, or he wore out. So I took them and chopped them up. I still have lots of scraps from this, but it's a very large quilt, and the first one that I did of this. Okay, we'll go through quickly. I know I'm running out of time. I hand quilted it. It was really hard. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever hand quilted. Next. This is another one where my son, these are made from his clothing that he outgrew 1 year. So I chopped them up and made them into this. And then on the next page, you can see that I also hand quilted that. I do a lot of hand quilting, and I always say I'm never going to do it because it's so hard on your hands, but I do love the look and what it does. Okay. And then more family jeans that we outgrew. We run through a lot of denim. This was made from 5 dresses that I found during the pandemic, and I couldn't give anything away to Goodwill. So I thought I'm going to chop it up and make it into this quilt. And then this is 7 by 7. It's 4 quilts I've made so far out of 7 shirts. I want to demonstrate what you can do with just 7 shirts. This was a commission I did. It's a front and back of the same quilt from a family whose father had passed away. So last category is commentary quilts. I'll just preface this by saying that these are my beliefs, and I encourage anybody who has commentary or feelings or beliefs that they use their art to express them. So that's my caveat as I stop, but these are quilts with a message. I started this really, I guess it was in 2017. My daughter asked us to go to the Women's March. She did these signs for us. My husband came, and from those, I started collecting the signs were so amazing that people did really great phrases and funny and clever. So I started really collecting text from protest signs. And the next quilt was the first one that I did from these, where I just was feeling compelled to put these things into words and also to own, even as a very liberal, progressive person, that, that we own patriotism as well. Those with our views own patriotism as well. So that was my expression of this. And this was acquired by a collector.
Lorraine, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah,
we are at time.
right. We're at time. So I'm sorry. I thought I was timing it well, but I didn't talk too much.
Don't worry. That was fascinating. Now let me move on to our next person. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Let me get rid of this. I need to get better at sharing these things. Here we go. So there we go. So we're going to move on, and oh damn, we would have seen your temperature quilts, which are also absolutely beautiful as well. We are going to move on though to Beth Ann Williams. Oops, sorry, Beth Ann. Let me just get this ready. Here we are. Share that. Go to slideshow mode and over to Beth Ann.
Okay, thank you. In the panel this morning, I showed a crazy quilt made by my great grandmother, Angie, and this is Angie's daughter, Lesta, my grandmother, holding me and my sister. And this is about the time that she started teaching me how to sew and quilt. So this was taken around 1971, and I've got the pigtails, so you can tell. And there's a close-up of the quilt that, oops, back one. That close up of that pink quilt was the quilt that my grandmother made for me when she made the baby quilt for my sister. So again, as we talked about this morning, in my family, almost every major milestone in our life was made marked with a quilt. And it's not so much anymore. That's kind of not as common with my daughter's generation and the next generation. But when I was growing up, it was still a big thing. Okay, next. Thanks, Bea. Now, for myself, after my youngest child was born in 1992, I was diagnosed with what became a series of debilitating chronic autoimmune disorders. And at the urging of Grandma Baldwin, who was one of those grandmas of the heart, if you've ever had somebody like that in your life, you're not a blood relation, but you love them so much, it's their family. So at the urging of Grandma Baldwin, I returned to quilt making for comfort, therapy, and as a way to leave something tangible for my children if I did not live to see them grow up. And that sounds really melodramatic, I know. But at the time, there was many nights when the doctors would call my husband and tell him to come to the hospital because they weren't sure I would live till morning. And I remember him sitting by my bed and saying, "You can't leave me with these babies," kind of a thing. So the quilts, that was the first thing I thought of because of growing up with these family quilts and wrapping up and feeling my grandmother's presence. I wanted to do that for my children. So now these fabrics are very 1992. I wouldn't pick the same thing now. But this is a close-up of the quilt that I made for my youngest. You can go ahead. And I grew up again making everything by hand, sewing and quilting and everything applique all by hand. But sewing and quilting became too difficult for me to do. So I had to learn how to use a sewing machine, not just for piecing, but for applique and quilting too. And this was a big emotional hurdle for me as well as a physical hurdle, but I often don't have sensation in my hands. So I had to learn how to do things without being able to feel everything. So again, this quilt was 1993, and it's the last one that I hand quilted. Okay. But the good news is those discoveries, that journey, learning how to do things by machine led to a whole new career. And one of the things that I had been drawn to was Celtic quilts because of my own family history, Scottish and Irish and English and Welsh and a little bit of all of that. Celtic designs had a lot of meaning for me, but it was all done by hand. And I knew that I couldn't do it by hand. And that's when Grandma Baldwin took me aside and said, just figure it out, figure it out. And eventually I did. And that led to a book deal with Martingale and Company. And my first book was Celtic Quilts, A New Look for Ancient Designs. And this is one of the patterns that's in that book. And I now use that central motif as my business logo. These are a few more quilts. The first two are patterns that I included in the book. And then the last one is a journal quilt that I made for myself that I thought you might enjoy seeing. Okay. And after all these years, and it's more than 30 years now, I'm still playing with Celtic designs. I find that I tend to work in series. So I'll work on Celtic quilts for a while. I'll do traditional quilts. I'll do improvisational quilts. But I always keep cycling back into different styles. But I always come back around. And these are some of my more recent Celtic style designs. These two small ones are both patterns that are available in my shop. Okay. I also enjoy finished edge invisible machine applique with traditional shapes. This is based on the classic orange peel shape, and that's a technique that I've taught many times. It's about time that I scheduled again, so I will be teaching it again soon. But when I do these classes, what I'm looking for is that same heirloom look that I used to be able to do when I did it by hand, but doing it completely by machine and completely finished edges. I don't have any raw edges in these quilts. It's not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just a different style. I also like to do finished edge invisible machine applique with non-traditional shapes and subjects. The larger one is a mandala quilt that I made for myself. And then I have a little landscape. The Create Your Own Quilted Landscapes is one of my popular classes that I've been teaching for a long time. Go ahead. I also love fully machine sewn versions of the cathedral windows. I first learned to do it by hand, but obviously that wasn't going to happen anymore. So I saw some different ways to do it online and then ended up tweaking it so that it was easier for me to do, and it got a little bit tidier results for me. And now it's also a class that I teach. Okay. I love the interplay of color and value. And so my second book, many years ago now, was on Bargello quilts. These are two. The first one, Star Kindler, was inspired by the night sky and the Hubble telescope kind of thing. And the second one is called Autumn Glow. And that was inspired by coming back from a trip from teaching up northern Michigan, which was just beautiful in the fall. So the sun was setting and you had that kind of a glow on the hills and the leaves were changing. And I came home and made this quilt that weekend. Okay. I also like to adapt classic patterns. The first one is an adaptation of a pineapple pattern, which is a version of a log cabin. And then the other one that's tilted on its side, those are very tiny logs. They finish just over a ½ inch wide. But it was, I know, it was my one and only venture into miniature quilts. But it was one of those times where, again, I needed to just do something. And I sat down and I had a pile of scraps. And like Lorraine, I don't throw my scraps away. I use them. And this was a good way to use those little tiny scraps and also to play with value and how that can create different designs. Okay. I also like to do simpler modern styles. And this is the Easy Pieces pattern, which is the quilt also behind me. And these are two of the smaller sizes. But I designed that because I teach a lot about color and value. And I wanted a way for people to play with color and value without having to worry about intricate piecing or anything difficult. I also like big prints. Like I love Tula and I love Cafe. And so these styles of quilts are good for those large scale prints. Okay. I also specialize in walking foot quilting. When I first started quilting, of course, it was by hand. And when I learned how to machine quilt in the early 1990s, pretty much walking foot quilting was in the ditch. You know, you either free motion quilted or you quilted in the ditch with your walking foot. And during the big early year of the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic, I had caught COVID teaching in March, like right, you know, there was no testing then or anything, and then long COVID, and was very, very sick for months. I wasn't mobile for about 7 months. And as I started to get back, I wanted to quilt again. And I realized that I didn't have enough strength in my arms to do the free motion that I wanted to do, that I had been doing on my quilts. And so I started to explore walking quilting again, and edge to edge designs and designs that would be easier for me to do physically, but would still get the looks that I want. And now it's one of my most popular classes, and I really enjoy doing it because there's so many things you can do with your walking foot, and it doesn't need to be difficult. And that's something that I really want to share with people, because I know I'm not the only one. Every time I've taught or spoken to a group, I'm always amazed. There's so many people who are dealing with physical issues, emotional issues, other kinds of challenges that affect their work. And I want to encourage you to keep going, don't give up. And for me, sometimes I'm in a walker, sometimes I'm in a wheelchair, sometimes I'm in an electric wheelchair. Sometimes I can't quilt at all. When I can, I go like a house of fire. My family cooks, my family cleans. They let me do my thing because it gives me so much joy. But I've also learned lots of different ways to do things that are easier. And so I encourage you, don't be discouraged, because there are ways to make it easier. You want to go ahead to the next one? We're almost done. Free motion quilting. I still do love free motion quilting. Now, truth in advertising, I have free motion quilted on my little home machine. I don't have a quilting machine. On my little home machine, 110 inches wide quilt. So I know how to do it. I've done it. I know how to do it. Physically, I don't have the strength to handle that big a quilt in my machine anymore, but I still do love to free motion quilt, but now I do it on smaller pieces. And I still teach it. And thread painting, which is why I'm in this event, to share thread painting, because again, it is not so hard. There's lots of fudge room. It's very forgiving. And so I encourage you to give it a try and let me know how it goes. And I want to thank you for letting me share my quilts with you. And I hope to see you again someday.
That was fascinating. Thank you. And thanks for sharing the difficulties you faced as well. I know so many people are struggling with often invisible burdens. Which bring many challenges. We had a question that came up in the Q&A, which is about whether each of you quilt your own quilts, or do you send them out to be quilted? So Beth Ann, do you want to touch on that?
I quilt most of my quilts. All of my small quilts, I quilt completely by myself. My larger quilts, especially the like double bed to king size quilts, I used to quilt all by myself, but now I have a friend, Terry of Threadtails Quilt Works, who quilts them for me, just because they're physically too heavy. I don't have the arm strength to deal with that anymore. But other than that, I do all my own.
And Lorraine, what about you? How do you handle that?
Yes, I quilt all my own quilts. I got a new long arm last year, so I've been spending all my energy learning how to do that. And I just started taking long arm customers, so that's a new thing for me this year.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. Well, that was extraordinary. So thank you, Beth Ann. Thank you, Lorraine. We've already had. So now we're going to hand over to Aline, sorry, who is going to go ahead. Aline, have you got? Yeah, are you able to share your screen? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And I will turn my microphone off in a minute, which will stop the jibber jabber in the background. And away you go.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me with you. Thank you for your company. Well, today, I just have to say again, I'm so proud to be here with these teachers today and with Bea, which is also a teacher and an amazing host. I feel so proud to be in this event again. So thank you so much. As we have a trunk show, I know you are missing Natasha. I'm missing Natasha too with us, but Natasha is preparing our classes because we have a lot of classes this month. So that's why she's not here with us. And we already have a mini trunk show in our class, in our free class, in this event, in this workshop. So I prepared something kind of strange. I put a miscellaneous of things that we think that don't make any sense together, but I hope I can make a sense at the end. So let's get started. This is our first quilt ever. This was the first time we've quilted. I'm showing this. I show this sometimes in workshops and trunk shows because we started in a very different way than most quilters that I know. I never heard a story like that. We became professional quilters in March 2014, and we've learned how to quilt for the very first time in June. So we were waiting for our machine. It was a very sitcom situation with a lot of unusual things happening. And this was our first quilt. And I like to share this because people always think that free motion quilting is so hard, but this is proof that if you learn free motion quilting without this mystique that is hard, you can actually find it fun and interesting and easy. So that's why I like to share this. But don't think for a moment that after this, we didn't bump into problems. We had all sorts of problems that you can imagine. The first one was feathers. So I also like to share our show quilts. I will show two today. And I'm making a very personal comment on them. So this is the most awarded quilt we have. This awarded in Canada, Houston, Paducah, each show it got. But I know it seems very complicated, and that's the secret I want to share today. This quilt is actually a larger, very the very same sketch that Natasha did for like a pillowcase. She loved it so much. I love it so much when we make this. And then we did some show quilts. But when we felt very comfortable that we could do whatever made us happy, we went back to that very first draft of a holy cloth and we did this quilt. And this quilt is the most awarded quilt we have. So don't think for a moment that you have to do something that someone else is doing. This is your artistic journey. This is your creation from your soul. So do whatever makes you happy, even if it sounds silly for other people. And speaking of silly, we have this one. This is another quilt that was very awarded. And we love it so much because it embodies what we think about quilting. We know that quilting, the free motion quilting, the actual stitches of the quilt can totally change how we read, how we perceive a piecing, a top, a quilt, and even life. And this is a quilt that we've made to prove that. In the top, we have a college of famous golden era actresses, and in the back, oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing a slide. Well, in the back, you can see only the B movie, horror shows, horror films. So we have Dracula in Marilyn Monroe, we have the Bride of Frankenstein in the face of Audrey Hepburn, and so on. So it completely changes how we look at the quilt, because it's, of course, an homage to cinema and moves, but it's actually a joke. It's actually an invitation to have fun and have joy with your quilt and with your quilting. And in the middle, right in the center of the quilt, up in next to the movable word, we have that very same little monster that we quilted in the very first day here in this quilt. So that's pretty special for us. Then I move to our last finishes. These are our quilts that we are doing today, because we do a lot of stuff and we quilt a lot of stuff, and we quilt every technique, everything that is possible. I have a real hard time dialing up and selecting things with like to show the body of our work, because it's very hard for me to select. So I select this by the most recent works that we've done. And this was a very fun quilt, because we mix it, it's like a fairy tale of flowers. So we have these blocks that are all kind of flowers. We remember that there is a resemble of flowers. And then in the border, we free motion quilted. Oh, actually, this is market quilting. We marked those flowers. A kind of magical flower that blossoms all kinds of flowers. So sunflowers, tulips, roses, orchids, everything is here. And this is another reminder that you were not bound to any rule and to any expectation except for your own desire in your quilts. That's why I love this quilt so much. And then we have this quilt. This is the Big Bang. Last year, we celebrated 10 years of quilting and teaching, because we started teaching like months before we started quilting. After, did I say before? After. That would be impossible, but after, even with a few weeks, it's possible. So it's after. And this was the first improv quilt that we invented years ago. And then last year, in 2024, we did this workshop again. It was a lot of fun, and the quilting is very simple. That's the message that I want to convey with this quilt. So if you think that free motion quilting or quilting itself has to be fancy in a long arm machine, in a special machine with special tools, etc., you don't. Your quilt can be special with a very simple quilt within the skills you have today. And this quilt is a very simple quilting, but I think it's pretty special. And I really love the backing, which is also pieced. And I love how the simple quilt really gives the right texture for this backing. It's almost like I like this side more. I actually had a hard time putting the sleeve in, because it was cover and give a top for the quilt. And then I have something that I haven't saw before, so I think you guys would enjoy seeing this. This is a whole cloth kimono. We see a lot of quilted jackets and quilted coats that are lovely, and they are sometimes from upcycling and sometimes brand new, and they are all amazing. But we did, of course, a whole cloth kimono. And because we love the backing of our quilt so much, this kimono is actually reversible. So you can use it both sides. And this is kind of a close-up. It's a fairly easy quilting to do. We actually had to design it as a whole cloth, but it's like simple ruler work. The complexity in this quilt, it's actually conceptual. That's why it looks so fancy, but it's not technically. Then we have the Halloween custom from last Halloween. I just cannot leave without saying that I love this quilt. If I bump into someone in the elevator, I will say, do you like Halloween? Well, I did the quilt, you will not ever imagine this. And that's because this quilt, it's all free motion quilted. So this bat here with this little candle, it's actually free motion quilted. We traced like 3 straight lines for sectioning some areas, and then we went for it, and we teach how to do this. And this is the most amazing, the thing that I'm more proud of, that we can do, you can do, I can do. When I say we, I'm not talking about Natasha and I'm talking about all the quilters. We all can do very beautiful free motion quilting in a very easy way, and we can make it look very complex, even if it's like in the basic skills. So we have this one, and this is the back of that quilt. So I'm super proud of this quilt. I really love it, and I especially love it, besides being all free motion, is that everything is continuous. So there's no starting and stopping to make anything, and we don't travel by ditches or quilting over the design that we already quilted. I really love it. This block actually give me the goosebumps because it's called Seance block. I'm like, don't give us that, but we did. So let's see. Now we have, this is the quilt that we have in our machine. So this was a workshop that we did for Christmas. And I love to share it because these loopies going on in this red area really look very complex. Even when I look at this, I say, this is impossible. We cannot quilt this like freehand. I look at this quilt and I cannot believe this is freehand. And I want to show it because I want people, if you have to take something out from my classes, from our workshops, from anything that we say, is that sometimes, most of times, something that really looks very complex and very difficult can be done easily with the right technique and the right tools. So it's not about effort. Beauty is not about effort. That's the great thing about free motion quilting. So we have this in our long arm right now. We quilt on all machines. We actually quilted first in our sit down, and we still quilting in a sit down. And then we have a little other detail of this quilt that I love so much. And then we have this area. I put this photo here because I want you to pay attention in the right border here. Little dots inside the spine, inside the feather. This is all that was marked for making this whole quilt. We used little dots to help us section some areas, and everything is continuous as well. So this is kind of an obsession for us because we really don't like to bury threads, and we bury a lot of threads when we do quilts for show because of thread changing and etc. So when we are quilting for patchwork and for these quilts that are not heavily densely quilted, we like to do like one start and stopping for the whole quilt. And the only time that we bury threads is when the bobbin runs out of thread, and we cannot dwell on that. So we will take it, but that's it. And
Aline, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to stop you there.
okay,
Absolutely fascinating, but we're at time. There was one question that came in. Do you use rulers for your straight lines?
Sometimes we use and sometimes don't. Sometimes when we want, like in the Big Bang quilt, this one, but in the other colors, because there's a lot of parallel quilt lines, very long lines, then we use, but most of the times, like in here, you can see that we don't use rulers for straight lines every time.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. That's absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to hand over now to Liz. And let me just share the rest of, where are we? Here we are, the presentation. And Liz, over to you.
Thank you very much. I've been so interested listening to the other quilters because I can identify with a lot well, I can identify a lot in each of them. So I just thought maybe I would tell you a little bit about myself. Obviously, I don't have a Canadian accent, and that is because I was born and raised in South Africa and then lived in a neighboring country called Namibia for some years before moving back to South Africa and then to Canada. So my accent, well, the funny thing is people back home tell me, oh, you don't sound South African anymore. I just laugh because they don't know nothing. Any of it, the point is that that I wanted to get to is that I used to be, until I retired, the national education manager for a sewing machine company in Canada. And so I had to do a little bit of every type of sewing. And so you can move to the next slide, B. This that you're looking at now is not a New York beauty. I am not a lover of foundation paper piecing. This is all done in my embroidery hoop of my machine. And I am really passionate about, and I'm just showing you with my cursor, there are 4 blocks in this. And it was a block of the month by Sweet Pea Designs in Australia. And I bought blocks 1 to 3, and I never got beyond block 1 because I got so busy with my teaching commitments that this fell to the side. But I'm really, really proud of this because some people will see it as a cheat because, oh, the embroidery machine's doing it for you. But you kind of have to know how to make your embroidery machine sing. And you have to know how to sew those blocks together seamlessly so that they're all neat. Thanks, we can go on to the next one. That one ended up as a pillow in my lounge, and it's always in my lounge except for Christmas time because I love it so much. Now, this is another Sweet Pea Designs. And of course, Liz always tries to push her skills a little further. And I decided to do this one on satin, cream satin, which if anybody knows anything about satin, it's not that easy to sew with. But I made it work because I put a interfacing, I ironed an interfacing onto the back of the satin to try to prevent fraying and to make it behave a little bit more like a quilting cotton. But all the green and the red fabric you see is applique in the hoop. And if I have to be honest, applique in the hoop is by far my favorite form of quilting. This ended up as a table topper, which sits on my coffee table year round, even though it's got mistletoe and red pomegranates. One day I'm going to make a whole quilt using this. That was the sum total of it. Let's move on, B. Here is another embroidered quilt. And by the way, ladies, I don't only do embroidery. I'll pitch in here and tell you that I have 3 stashes I have a garment sewing stash, and 98% of what I sew is knit fabric in all its forms. So my closet is, let's just say, bulging. I've just bought more hangers. I also have a lingerie fabric stash because I teach how to make lingerie, and my lingerie drawers, they're not one drawer anymore, they're two, one for panties and one for bras. So ladies, I don't just do quilting, but I love all three, and it's so nice to be able to hop from one to the next. This one is all embroidered, and they are blocks that you then sew together, much like the first slide I showed you. I believe it was called Picturesque Peacock, and it is an OESD embroidery design. It's also known as embroidery online. Excuse me, if anyone is interested in that. It was a large number of hoopings, but I believe I did it during the pandemic when we all had a little bit of time, didn't we? More time than we wanted, actually. And that it hangs permanently on my entrance hall wall. Moving along. So yes, I do a lot of applique in the hoop, and there is showing you how the process happens. I can cut my fabric before I lay it down on the hoop for the machine to stitch around it, but I often can't be bothered with that, or even though I do have a digital cutter, I actually let it stitch, and then I take the hoop off the machine, cut the fabric away real close to the stitching, and then put it back on the machine, and it gives you the results that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. Thank you, Bea. There's a close-up of one, and I really, really enjoy doing this kind of thing. In fact, when my granddaughter, I don't have a picture of it here, but I'll put it on the Facebook page. When my first granddaughter arrived, and she is now 14, oh my goodness, and she's taller than me, I made her a quilt with lots of bright pinks and yellows, and that was called Granny's Joy because she was my first grandchild, and I now have a fifth one on the way. So it's all very exciting. Okay, Bea, next one. This is just a little mug rug, and I do have in one of my classes, I teach how to bind quilts, and I teach a dozen different ways to bind your quilts, and this is one of them, where you actually take yarn and put it around the edge of your trimmed quilt and then zigzag it in place. So I just put that there as a fun thing, and the next slide will show a little bit more of my KitchenAid mixer cover, and that is of course applique and the hoop once again, but I had no pattern for that. I just sort of measured sort of around the mixer, and then made one long big thing, and as you can see, cross-hatched quilted it, and then on the two ends I did applique and the hoop, and it was a fun project, and it is reversible. It's a different color on the inside, so if I get tired of the lime green, I can switch it around and have navy blue on the other side. Next slide. Okay, this one, this one, I think was a one-day wonder, because I was encouraged by the president of the Canadian Quilters Association. When she saw my quilts in the booth, our sewing machine booth, she says, "Why have you never entered a quilt into Quilt Canada?" And I sort of thought about it, and I thought, yeah, why haven't I? So this was my very first entry into the NJS in Canada, and I won a prize. I actually won a vastly huge amount of wonderful threads. So, you know, when I pass the Great Divide, I'm sure my girlfriends are going to be disposing of a lot of that, because I don't think I can ever use it all up before I pass the Great Divide. That is also applique in the hoop. And I did probably about 48, 50 blocks, and then auditioned them. And I really appreciate what the two ladies before, Aline and Natasha, do. The background was free motion quilted with invisible thread, which was no mean feat. I think it took me about 6 different types of needles before I could get the thread to stop shredding and breaking. And each of the medallions is 3 layers of high loft batting behind them so that they are very much trapuntoed. And it is the joy of my life. It hangs on my lounge wall. And if anybody's never seen it before, they say, "Oh, Liz, did you make that?" Yeah. And the ribbon's on it too. Okay, next slide. And why it's a 7-day wonder, or 1-day wonder probably, that was in 20, I don't know, can't even remember now, 20 something, way long ago, probably 10 or 12 years ago. My hair was very short at that stage. And you can see a little bit the free motion stippling, which was all done free motion behind. I do have a very, very good and close friend who has a long arm. So if I need to get something long armed, I go and stay with her for a night or two because she lives a little bit out of town, and I do my free motioning there. And the main reason, because I find the quilts too heavy and much too hard on my shoulders and elbows, that are sort of kind of wrecked from dragging suitcases around for too many years. Okay, next slide. All right, so this one was long-armed, and I know it's on its side, but it was the way I could get it so that you could see the whole thing. It also hangs on the wall, and you can go to the next picture, B. That is a close-up showing you the sort of like elongated circles, because it was so sort of stars and straight lines and a gazillion 2.5-inch half square triangles that I will probably not ever do again. You know, I think as we progress in our quilting journey, we get to know what we love and what brings us joy and what we don't love. And I saw this quilt finished, and on a spur of the moment thing, I bought the kit and I bought the class, and it was quite a lot of money, more than I usually spend. And so, of course, that was part of the impetus to finish this quilt. And the only way, I think, really in the end, was sitting at 2 quilting retreats and having the ladies sitting near me say, come on, Liz, you can finish this. Do some more, Liz. And I'm very pleased to say that it is now finished, and it hangs on the wall in my dining room. So let's move on to the next one. How are we going for time? Okay, I think we're right. Okay.
You've got 4 minutes.
Okay, this quilt I made many years ago, and it was sort of a foray into artistic quilting. So there's loads of decorative stitches there and couching and all that sort of thing. And I called it a fresh start. It was after a period of a lot of stress in my life because my husband had been very, very ill. And I just loved the bright spring green colors. And that's how I feel in Canada when the buds start on the trees in sort of March. We get spring very early where I am on the West Coast, because after the dry, not the dry, they're very wet gray winters, but no spring green. This means a lot to me. Next slide. This one was done in a class with Gloria Lothman. Some of you may have come across her. She is an award-winning quilter from Australia who also has written a number of books, and I did her tiling technique for my Sunset Sky. And of course, I was born in Africa, so essentially I am an African. I had to have my favorite animal, which is elephants, and the thorn tree. And so we can move on to the next one. So you can see I do all sorts of quilting, not just applique and the hoop. This one is a quilt as you go. You know, where you put your fabric down, stitch it, flip it, press it, and put the next piece. And this ended up in, well, it ended up in a placemat here, but it can end up as a quilt. It can end up as zipper baggies, and I make a gazillion zipper baggies as well. I do that for charity, and I do it for gifts. Next slide. This is a bag that I made, and I think she's watching me. She'll recognize her potted plants. I made this one for one of my very close friends, and that was also sweet pea designs. And you make a whole lot of different blocks, sew them together, and then you have a tote bag. And I really enjoyed doing that one. I made one for myself in lime green because I do love lime green, as I mentioned. Next slide. This is a humbug bag. The reason it's called humbug is because when I was a child, my dad, if we'd been good, would pull out the tin of, I think it was Macintosh's mint humbugs. And they were hard candy with chewy bit inside. I lived in South Africa, but all my ancestry was Scottish. And my dad used to buy these tins and he'd open it, and it had sort of like a metal lid. So none of us would have dared open it ourselves. And he would give us a mint humbug. And this bag is very much similar to the shape of a mint humbug. I'm pretty sure Bea knows those candies because they're British candies. And my son lives in London, actually, so I get to go there quite often to see my grandchildren. This project is the project in the VIP class. So if you have purchased the VIP pass, you will be able to see how to do this humbug bag. And the next slide is also another picture of a humbug bag. I love my decorative stitches on my machine and I use them a lot. So you can do almost anything you like on a humbug bag. And the zipper is so easy to put in. It's not complicated like, you know, dressmaking and making garments. Okay, I think that might be the last slide, is it? Yes. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Bea, for giving me the opportunity of speaking. And if anybody wants to know more, please just put your questions in the Facebook group. And I'll also post some pictures of some of the other things because I know it's hard to see it up close.
I just want to thank you all for such an amazing session. And I know we had to rush sometimes, but so many amazing quilts there. Thank you so much. Just before we go, and I realize we're on the hour now, I just want to make sure that people know where to find you, to find more of your work. So the order you're in on my screen is Aline, Liz, Beth Ann, and Lorraine. So if you just want to say your website or your social, whatever you want to share, and so people can catch up with you there. Aline.
Awesome. So I am Orbital Quilting here. We are in Instagram. You can grab our courses on learn.orbitalquilting.com, and our email is hi@orbitalquilting.com. So very easy.
Wonderful. Thank you. Liz, what about you?
Me. Okay. I think the easiest to say sewwithliz.com, 2 W's in the middle, and all my social media links are there. I do also have a Facebook group, Sew and Learn with Liz Thompson. So you're very welcome to come and find me there.
Perfect. Beth Ann, how about you?
The easiest one is shop.BethAnnWilliams, and Ann is just ANN, and it's all run together.com. And there's links there to my shop, to my classes, to the blog, to the freebies, to booking information and social media and everything else.
Wonderful. And then last but definitely not least, Lorraine.
I'm quiltinginthefog.com, and on Instagram, I'm at quiltinginthefog.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. And we have one more live event coming in about 4 hours time. And yes, thank you so much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.